In the American West of the 1800s, death didn't always come from a silver-plated revolver or a dramatic standoff at high noon. More often than not, it arrived in a cup of tainted water, a splinter that turned gangrenous, or the sheer crushing weight of the silence. We have been sold a myth of gilded heroes and clean linen dusters, but the reality was etched in salt, sweat, and wood smoke. To step across the Mississippi River in the mid-19th century was to step off the map of the known world. It was a place where the law ended and the horizon began, a landscape of such staggering scale that it could swallow an entire civilization without leaving a trace. People headed west not for adventure, but out of a desperate, clawing need for a second chance. They traded the safety of the East for a gamble against a landscape that didn't want them there. This was the American frontier, a brutal, beautiful, and unforgiving theater of human ambition. And once the journey began, there was no turning back. To understand the Wild West, we must understand the why. In the 1840s, a fever gripped the American soul. Manifest destiny. It was the belief that the continent was a divine gift waiting to be claimed from sea to shining sea. But this was a geopolitical mirage. Between the settled East and the promising Pacific lay 2,000 miles of what mapmakers called the Great American Desert. The West was built on three pillars: gold, land, and iron. The 1849 gold rush turned San Francisco from a sleepy hamlet into a chaotic metropolis of 30,000 people in mere months. Then came the Homestead Act of 1862, promising 160 acres of land to anyone brave or foolish enough to farm it. Finally, the transcontinental railroads stitched the continent together with ribbons of steel. These weren't just transport lines, they were the arteries of an empire, pumping people, cattle, and capital into a wilderness that was already inhabited. But this progress had a dark shadow. The taming of the West meant the systematic destruction of the great bison herds, the lifeblood of the Plains Indians. For the Lakota, the Cheyenne, and the Comanche, the 1800s weren't an era of settlement, but an era of apocalypse. The West was not won, it was conquered, acre by bloody acre.
The trail west was paved with more than just intentions. It was paved with the belongings of those who couldn't carry the weight. Diaries from the 1850s, like those of Margaret Reed, speak of a landscape littered with luxury, fine china, heavy oak dressers, and even family heirlooms cast aside to lighten the load for dying oxen. But the most heartbreaking markers were the shallow graves. It is estimated that for every mile of the Oregon Trail, there are 10 bodies buried beneath the dirt. To move forward, you had to learn the brutal art of leaving the past, and sometimes your loved ones, behind in the dust.
Forget the white picket fences of Kansas. The real towns of the 1800s were boomtowns, fragile wooden skeletons thrown up overnight. They were built for extraction, not for permanence. A town could be the richest place on earth on Tuesday and a ghost town by Friday if the silver vein ran dry. Architecture was a secondary concern to survival. The saloons weren't just for drinking, they were the post offices, the courtrooms, and the town squares. Life in these towns was lived in the mud. There were no sewers, no paved roads, and very few doctors. The wild in Wild West didn't just refer to the outlaws, it referred to the lack of basic human infrastructure. A simple infection from a shaving cut was more likely to kill you than a gunfight. This was a society in its rawest form, a collection of strangers from every corner of the globe, bound together by greed and the hope that tomorrow would be better than yesterday. In this vacuum of authority, the great equalizer was born, the Colt revolver. It was the first time in history that a single person could carry the power of 6 men in their holster. It changed the nature of human interaction. In the West, your safety wasn't guaranteed by the state, it was guaranteed by your own hand.
Where the Colt failed, the rope took over. In places like Fort Smith, Arkansas, Judge Isaac Parker, known to history as the Hanging Judge, ruled over a territory of 74,000 square miles with an iron fist. In his 21 years on the bench, he sentenced 160 people to gallows. For the people of the frontier, justice wasn't a philosophical debate. It was a swift, public, and often terrifying necessity to keep the darkness of the wilderness from swallowing the flickering light of civilization. The law didn't arrive with a book, it arrived with a shadow.
If you close your eyes and think of a cowboy, you likely see a tall, white man in a clean hat, but history tells a different story. The American cowboy was a laborer, not a hero.
1 in 4 cowboys was black. Many of them former slaves, seeking a life where their skill with a horse mattered more than the color of their skin. Another third were Mexican vaqueros, who had been herding cattle in the Southwest for centuries before the first American settler arrived. The long drive was a brutal months-long trek, moving thousands of cattle from Texas to the railheads in Kansas. It was 18 hours a day in the saddle, breathing dust, dodging stampedes, and sleeping on the cold ground. It was lonely, low-paying work. The wild nights in Abilene or Dodge City at the end of the trail were the only release for men who had spent 4 months with nothing but the moon and the lowing of cattle for company. And then there were the sodbusters, the families who tried to farm the wind-swept plains. With no timber to build houses, they lived in soddies, homes made of earth. They fought locust swarms that could darken the sun and droughts that turned the soil to powder. Their story is the true heartbeat of the West, not the flash of a gun, but the steady, rhythmic strike of a plow against stubborn earth. The Wild West ended not with a bang, but with a wire. In 1874, the invention of barbed wire did what no army could. It fenced the open range. The era of the free-roaming cowboy was over. Property lines were drawn. The railroad reached every corner of the map. In 1890, the U.S. Census Bureau officially declared that the frontier no longer existed. The map was full. The survivors of the 1800s emerged into a 20th century they barely recognized. The men who had fought Comanches and survived the Oregon Trail were now living in a world of telephones, electricity, and automobiles. They became the storytellers, turning their dirty, painful reality into the polished myths we see on screen today. They chose to remember the glory and forget the cholera. They remembered the sunsets and forgot the hunger. We are still fascinated by the 1800s because it represents the last time in history when a person could truly disappear into the unknown. It was a time of terrifying freedom and absolute responsibility. We look back at those dusty streets and empty plains and ask ourselves, if we were stripped of our technology and our safety nets, would we survive the West, or would the West survive us? Anyways, I'm Harry, watching the past so we can understand the present. And together, we keep history reborn. I'll see you in the next era.